Did the Bundys go too far? Of course they did. I can think of two reasons that a rational person would say otherwise. One, that they had a just cause and they were engaging in civil disobedience, something that everyone has a right to do. The other would be, in an age where politicians and governments do nothing, they acted, and thus they had reason to do as they did. To the first point, I would reply that any act of civil disobedience in which the participants are armed, implying the threat to use force, is no longer civil and must be viewed as one of two things: an armed criminal act or an act of revolution. I will not debate the merits of the Bundys' causes with my opponent Stan, and if he wishes to argue the value of what they were trying to do, that their grievances were valid, I will concede the point, because I think generally it's irrelevant. Indeed, if they had not been armed, we would not be discussing this issue today. Instead, we would be talking about whether the federal government owns too much Western land, or whether or not they have the right to charge a fee for ranchers to graze on that land. What we discuss today, though, instead, is whether or not they went too far. There is no doubt that the Bundys wanted to start an armed rebellion in a nation in which the right to overthrow tyranny is part of our political DNA. But I have two issues with conferring that level of legitimacy on the Bundys' cause. First, the right of revolution is a right held by the community, not the individual. And the grievances they represented against the federal government were not widespread enough or serious enough to be viewed as acts of systemic tyranny. The Declaration of Independence and 35 of our state constitutions recognize the right of the community to overthrow tyranny by force of arms. The Bundy family did not constitute a community, and while more than 100 people eventually joined their cause, they were not representative of a larger body than themselves as individuals, and never constituted in any way the kind of community that was foreseen by Locke, Rousseau, and Jefferson as envisioned owners of that right. Their notice of redress of grievances, dated December 11, 2015, specifies the causes which they were standing for. And I'll read you some of those causes. That Dwight and Stephen Hammond, two of their friends, committed no crime in the act of performing the prescribed burn and backfire. They were objecting to the fact that the federal government had taken them to prison. That the U.S. Congress does not have authority to legislate minimum sentences. That they have evidence of federal agents exhibiting a culture of intimidation. It goes on. But against this article of grievances, I offer up the grievances of a document of which I believe morally justified the revolt of 13 English colonies. That he, the King of England, has obstructed the administration of justice, has kept among us in times of peace standing armies, quartered large bodies of troops among us, cut off our trade with all parts of the world, imposed taxes without our consent. As you can see, they are grievances of an entirely different magnitude. So the Bundys and their friends did not constitute a kind of community to which such a right belongs, and their grievances, no matter how worthy, do not rise to the level for which there is moral justification for a revolution. To the second point, upon which one might argue in their favor, that they were doing something in a time when governments were typically do nothing. I would say that action alone is insufficient to win a football game. If it were, every team would have a trophy, every player would have a medal, and who thinks that is the world we want to live in? Leadership in any endeavor needs a valid strategy for success as part of the responsibility of leadership. Do you think the Bundys had one? No, they didn't. So yes, the Bundys went too far.